Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Louis Sports Network. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Tuesday night as we get ready for this Thanksgiving weekend with Black Friday coming up. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure your post notifications are turned on. Make sure you're sharing on your social media platforms. Truly appreciate that. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Tuesday night. Definitely appreciate you guys as always, man. Always thank you guys for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing on the channel. Much love, appreciate it. Peace and blessings. Without you, there is no me. You already know, as it always, what it is. On to the video. So I wanted to do this video because I've been watching a lot other content creators who are, wrestling, who do wrestling content. This is definitely about two of my all-time favorite WWE superstars and just wrestlers in general, all time, from watching them when I grew up. And these two guys are Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Texas Rattlesnake, against the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, the Hitman, as rest in peace Scott Hall would say, the excellence of execution, Bret the Hitman Hart from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about these two guys is because they had two of the most classic matches in wrestling history and obviously in WWE history in their classic encounter for their first ever meeting one-on-one in a big pay-per-view setting such as Survivor Series, one of the four biggest events throughout the year, in Survivor Series of 96 at Madison Square Garden, and WrestleMania 13 at the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, Illinois, in Chicago. And they had a submission match, right? Now, it really depends on which match you prefer. Both of those matches were instant classics when I watched them both. And I remember watching them both when I was 9 years old, both for 96 and 97, because I'm a summer baby. So WrestleMania was in March. What's crazy about the Survivor Series match, and I look back on the match at WrestleMania, it's interesting because we saw two different styles, two different type of matches. When you look at the Survivor Series match that they had in 96, there was really no build to that match. They never had a face-off, and they kept doing interviews. Keep in mind that Austin was starting to call out Bret, like, I want to say around maybe August, September-ish. And not only that, he was really starting to rise up stock-wise. And you was really starting to see like the attitude come out of Steve. You were starting to see a lot more intensity come out of Steve. I love the iconic promo that he did when it was previewing the Survivor Series. That vignette that he did with Bret and was talking about, I don't dance, I'm no pretty boy, the boy toy, as he was talking about Shawn Michaels, kicked your ass at WrestleMania, right? And he kicked you, you know what, and sent you back to Canada. What people forget about Bret was Bret had lost the title to Shawn at WrestleMania 12. And originally in storyline, in the match for Stone Cold Steve Austin, when they did the video package, they were saying, Bret took 6 months off. He was off of TV for 6 months. But what they don't tell you is Bret was still wrestling after WrestleMania. He was wrestling in the, I forgot the name of that tour that they did over in the Middle East. Oh man, I forgot the name of that tour. But it was in Kuwait. I forgot the name of it, but I know that Hart was still wrestling, when the WWE was out over there in Europe and in the Middle East. And his last real official match, if I could be wrong about this, but I know that they had a little tournament That was the tournament that Ahmed Johnson won for the cup, and I think it was in Kuwait, if I'm not mistaken. And Brett had wrestled Austin, and one of the first times I ever saw them wrestle one-on-one overseas. That was around May of '96. It was, I believe, after that tour was when he officially took time off. But on TV, he was written off of TV for months, but he still wrestled up until May of '96. And then Brett made his return in October of '96 after being called out by Austin. And then Brett was saying that he was going to take the challenge of the best wrestler today in Stone Cold and all that kind of stuff. And I remember Brian Pillman was like jumping out for joy, and Austin just gave him like a look like, what the hell are you doing? Because for those who don't know, those guys were known as the Hollywood Blondes in WCW. And it's definitely one of the best what ifs ever because they complemented each other so well. They were able to win the WCW Tag Team Championships. Really good team and had amazing chemistry. It's a shame WCW pulled the plug from them way too fast for whatever reason, because in their eyes, Austin was not marketable. And Austin got hurt quite a bit when he was over there. But anyway, so Austin's character is really starting to pick steam. They have these like face-offs and they have these solo interviews up to that point. So there was really no build. So they kind of went back and forth in interviews, even though they were mentioning some other people, at the time, but there was really no build to the match. Solid video package, but even then, so I was just like, okay, I know these two are probably going to do well, but I just wondered how well they were going to do at Survivor Series. This is at the time before Austin had his neck injury that he suffered at SummerSlam the following year against Owen Hart for the IC belt. You couldn't have asked for one of the better technically sound matches that you saw at Madison Square Garden at Survivor Series in '96. And what was cool was Austin, I thought, did a pretty good job at keeping up with Bret Hart. When Bret Hart's submission and wrestling is his forte, Austin did a pretty good job keeping up with her. And people forget that Austin was a good technical wrestler. He started out as a technical wrestler when he got into the business. And I think what was so great was how competitive the match was. That's what I loved about it. It was technically competitive. And when you look at the finish, Brett did the whole WrestleMania 8 finish that he did with Piper, another underrated match in one of the Bret Hart's archives, to get the 1, 2, 3. And that was kind of the end of it for a bit because, like I said, they had these little run-ins with each other, but it wasn't. They didn't really settle anything. Like they didn't really meet until February of '97, and that had to do with Shawn losing his smile, because they weren't supposed to meet originally. Actually, no, they did meet, but in a fatal 4-way. But what I'm basically alluding to is, you had a technically sound match at Survivor Series. One of the best it was the match of the night. And then you fast forward to WrestleMania 13. What has transpired since then? You talk about Austin winning the Royal Rumble. Well, before that, we have to kind of backtrack a bit. Brett was the number one. So people forget, Austin versus Hart at Survivor Series was to determine the number one contender to face whoever won between Sid and Shawn on the same night at the next pay-per-view, which was Vader, It's Time. And you know what's so crazy? And I didn't even realize this. This goes to show you that it was honestly really supposed to be Vader's time to win the championship. And the fact that Vader was kind of just written off due to Shawn for what happened at SummerSlam, it goes to show you that the WWE was gonna try to go all in with Vader, but Shawn nixed those plans when he was very frustrated with, one, how stiff Vader worked, in his opinion, and remember, Shawn called him out on that spot that Vader forgot to complete. And Shawn was visibly angry, and he visibly kicked him in the face, for real. That wasn't even fake. It was no kayfabe. It was a real kick to the face. Anyway, Brett was starting to get frustrated because of Shawn's interference in the match, and Brett was starting to feel a bit different. This is when you started to see Brett with a bit of attitude. Brett came in as that, hero, which he would later talk about in his promo after the day after WrestleMania. But Brett came back as the typical babyface hero that he thought everybody wanted him to be, and that people would cheer for him, and that he believes in having the good fight, and everybody has somebody that stands up for what's right and the moral values of being a good wrestler and a good person, in the business. But times were changing. Excuse me. So now you have Austin winning the Royal Rumble when he got legally eliminated, but illegally came back in. Brett gets frustrated the next night on Raw, and he kind of does his quit address, quote unquote. And you can see the looks on the faces of Vince and JR and the King. And he says he quits. Austin does his little promo, so they make the little fatal 4-way match. Shawn at this point becomes champion again after Sid beats him at Survivor Series. And then Brett accepts the challenge of the fatal 4-way to get a shot at the belt. Shawn loses his smile, so then it becomes for the title. Then Brett wins the belt, and then Brett has to defend it the very next night against Sid. Stone Cold interferes on 3 occasions on that same night. And that was when you really saw the build of the match. When you saw Austin win the Royal Rumble illegally. And then Brett wins the championship. And then 3 different times Austin interferes, in Brett's pretty much match. And then backstage, Brett loses the title and Brett is going crazy. He's like, where's this SOB at? Then you have Brett competing in a steel cage match for the title against Psycho Sid, and Austin tried to help him win, and then Undertaker interferes. Sid retains the championship, and this is where Brett, little by little, he got to the point where he just snapped, and this was attitude Bret Hart, and you could clearly see the heel in Bret, and it was one of the most infamous segments in wrestling history. So now we go to the submission match. And now Brett and Austin, they've interfered in each other's matches like throughout the last couple of months. And it picked up steam in December. And from December to March. And then the interviews that they had. Now you have a proper build for this match. See, there was no build going into Survivor Series. But now at WrestleMania, you have a build. And it's a submission match. And Brett at this point got a mixed reaction. He was starting to get signs in the crowd that he was a whiner, he was a crier. The thing was, Brett was the last of that whole cartoon era of the 90s, of the whole new generation. Once Austin started to gain popularity in terms of his character, and you look at some of the attitude that happened late 96, because even Brett was starting to show it too. When you look back at that submission match, you have to ask yourself, did Brett really turn heel? Or was it that Brett never really did turn heel? Brett just adapted to the time period. And to me, it was Brett adapting to the time period, because people are on record as saying that Brett is not a great promo artist, and to a degree he isn't. But this is the best way that I describe Bret Hart. In-ring work, psychology, storytelling, he's a babyface. Mic work, heel. Because if you look at 1997, Bret's mic work was nothing short of great. It was great. It was, even as a face, he treated the wrestling as a sport. I think that was one of the best things about Bret in terms of his babyface character. Like, he made it believable. He made it about the sport, even though it was entertainment and it was all acting, which is what Vince had turned it into. But Bret treated it like a sport. Once he became a heel, This is the whole controversy with Bret when it comes to heel. Sometimes when you look at Bret's promos as a heel, if you look at 97, he needed somebody that he hated to kind of get the best out of him, because now it's like he almost drew the lines of kayfabe, what's real and what's fake. And he made it so believable. And we had the Canada versus America. The Canada versus America angle that you use. So Bret was pretty much, he's what you call Two-Face. If you see the character Two-Face in Batman, he was two sides of the coin. When he was not in America, Bret was he was a folk hero. He was somebody, he was an inspiration, somebody everybody looked up to. When he was in America, he was a villain. He was two different characters in one in 1997 when Bret decided to go heel. But I also said that I felt like he was not really a heel. It's just he adapted to the time when you look at the fans. And Bret did not want to turn heel. He didn't want to originally. But he understood the business, and he understood that we had a rising star in Stone Cold, and Bret said he could make great money with him. And the funny thing is, when you look back at that submission match was pretty much an all-out brawl. It was brutal. There was some wrestling moves here and there, but it was just a fight. And the fight was so good. The submission match was more historic, and it was more significant because there was a shifting of change. Bret changed due to the reaction of the crowd. And if you watch that match, post-match, Bret drew a lot of heat. He drew heat because even when he put Austin in the sharpshooter, and Austin, you have that iconic symbol of the blood rushing down his face and him screaming in pain, but he did not tap out. He didn't say, "I quit." He didn't give up, and he passed out from the pain, and Bret won. Bret got a mixed reaction, but Bret attacked him after the match. And when Ken Shamrock took him off him with kind of like a throwaway belly back suplex, and then people thought if Bret was going to go after Ken Shamrock, Bret walked away. And that's when Bret drew heat. But what still people forget was Austin didn't go up right away. He was a tweener during that time. He was still a tweener. It really wasn't until more so about August, September 97 was when he really became, the beloved anti-hero. People were starting to love him, yes, but it didn't go up right away. It still took a little bit of time before his character really got up there. By late 97, that was when, Austin was the guy. And he was going to become the next guy. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. You have a technical match that had no build. And then you have WrestleMania 13, which was the more significant historic match and the best match of the night at that night, because all the matches were they were not really that good. That had the significant impact in the career of Bret and the career of Stone Cold Steve Austin. What it did for Austin, what it did for the business. You have a submission all-out brawl style match, which is something that Austin would become later in his career due to the neck injury he sustained at the hands of Owen, and he had to change his style. But Austin was a really good technical wrestler prior to that, and proved to you in that match in Survivor Series in 96, he could put on a really good match. And he did that with Bret. So let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, and the storytelling was great in both matches, but especially the one in 97. But ladies and gentlemen, let me know what your thoughts on this match between the two matches. Which one was the better match for you? Do you love both matches, or do you prefer one over the other? Do you prefer the WrestleMania 13 match in Chicago, or do you prefer the Survivor Series 96 match at Madison Square Garden? But Bret and Austin, two of my all-time GOATs. You already know what it is. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And let me know what you guys think about the significance of both matches. And add further detail if you can. Let me know what you guys think. Bless up, live, laugh, love. Thank you guys for watching.